Michael Harrington pulled his Forest Service jacket tighter against the autumn chill as he followed the trail of broken branches deeper into the Appalachian wilderness. The morning mist still clung to the ground, weaving between ancient oaks and pines that had stood sentinel long before humans had named these mountains. 20 years as a park ranger had taught him to read the forest like a book, and something about this particular chapter felt wrong. His radio crackled. "Ranger Harrington, you copy. Any sign of that meteor the observatory reported?" "Nothing conclusive yet," Michael replied, his breath visible in the cool air. "Just some damaged trees and—" He stopped mid-sentence as the mist parted ahead of him, revealing a shallow crater about 15 feet across, wisps of smoke still rising from scorched earth. "Actually, I think I found the impact site. I'll call back after I've investigated." As he approached the edge of the crater, his trained eyes scanned for meteorite fragments, but what he saw instead froze him in place. Lying half concealed in fallen leaves was a figure that appeared human in form, but definitely not in nature. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent blue that shifted like the northern lights with each shallow breath. Delicate, translucent wings, now torn and crumpled, extended from her shoulders, and her features, though humanoid, carried an otherworldly elegance. "My God," he whispered, training and instinct overriding his shock as he rushed to her side. The alien girl's pulse, if that's what the flutter beneath his fingers could be called, was rapid and erratic. A luminescent fluid that resembled liquid sapphire seeped from several wounds, most seriously from a gash across her abdomen. Michael's wilderness first aid training had never covered extraterrestrial biology, but the principles of treating shock and blood loss seemed applicable enough. He worked quickly, using the medical supplies from his pack to clean and dress her wounds. The iridescent blood seemed to respond to his touch, congealing faster than human blood would. Once he'd stabilized her as best he could, the practical question loomed: what next? Protocol dictated he report this immediately. Yet something made him hesitate as his hand hovered over his radio. Images flashed through his mind: government facilities, laboratories, dissection tables. He'd seen enough movies to imagine what might happen to the first confirmed alien on Earth. "You deserve better than to be someone's science experiment," he murmured to the unconscious figure. Decision made, he carefully lifted her, surprised at how light she was despite her height, and began the arduous 3-mile trek back to his cabin. The isolated outpost had been his home for 15 years, off-grid and perfect for a man who preferred trees to people. Night had fallen by the time Michael pushed through his cabin door, his unexpected guest still unconscious. He gently laid her on his bed and refreshed her bandages, noting with astonishment how the smaller wounds were already showing signs of healing. He stoked the fire in the wood stove and settled into his armchair to keep watch, Forest Service protocols, and perhaps interplanetary diplomacy thoroughly abandoned. It was near midnight when a soft, melodic sound drew his attention. The alien girl's eyes had opened, vertical pupilled and the color of amethyst, and fixed directly on him. The musical clicks and trills that emanated from her were clearly speech, though utterly incomprehensible. Her expression, however, was universal, fear mingled with confusion. Michael raised his hands slowly, palms open. "You're safe," he said, knowing she wouldn't understand the words, but hoping his tone would convey their meaning. "I'm not going to hurt you." As they regarded each other across the cabin's warm glow, neither could possibly fathom how this chance encounter would soon reshape two worlds. Dawn broke with Michael awakening in his armchair, momentarily confused until his eyes landed on the alien girl sitting cross-legged on his bed. She was meticulously examining a worn paperback dictionary. her slender blue fingers tracing each word with extraordinary focus. "You're awake," Michael said cautiously, unsure how to proceed. The alien looked up, her violet eyes studying him with keen intelligence. "Awake. Yes, awake." Her pronunciation was unusual but recognizable, each syllable carrying a musical quality. Michael's jaw dropped. "You can talk. You learned English overnight." She tilted her head, wings shimmering slightly as they caught the morning light. "Not complete. Learning still." She tapped the dictionary. "This help. Mind absorbs patterns." Over breakfast, she cautiously sampled his oatmeal before devouring 3 bowls with surprising enthusiasm. Michael learned she could communicate her name as something approximating Lyra. "Your world. Beautiful," she ventured, gesturing toward the window where sunlight filtered through golden autumn leaves. "Different from mine. More wild." Michael wanted to ask about her home, her species, how she'd come to crash in his forest, but her vocabulary remained limited. Instead, he found paper and coloured pencils, inviting her to draw what words couldn't yet express. Her artistic ability surpassed human capacity. Within minutes, she had rendered a breathtaking landscape of crystalline spires beneath twin moons, surrounded by floating gardens where winged beings like herself soared between impossibly delicate structures. "Home," she said simply. "It's beautiful," Michael replied, genuinely awestruck. "How did you end up here?" Lyra's expression clouded as she sketched a sleek vessel, then jagged lines representing damage, a fiery descent. Mission, peaceful. Then sabotage. Before Michael could inquire further, the distant sound of helicopters caused Lyra to freeze, her wings flattening against her back in what appeared to be an instinctive response to danger. "Military exercises," Michael explained, though they seemed unusually close to the restricted wildlife area. "They fly over sometimes." Lyra shook her head emphatically. "Not safe. They'd searching." "Searching for what?" Michael asked, but her agitation suggested the answer. "For you?" She nodded, moving to the cabin's small window to scan the sky. "Others follow, not friends." Michael turned on his battery-powered radio, something he rarely did in his self-imposed isolation. As he cycled through frequencies, fragments of emergency broadcasts filled the cabin. Unprecedented contact. Spacecraft in orbit. Ultimatum delivered in multiple languages. Military advises citizens to remain calm. Lyra's hands trembled as she listened. "My people." Worried. Thinking I? Captive. "Your people are here, above Earth." Michael asked, realization dawning that this wasn't simply a lost traveller, but potentially a diplomatic crisis of astronomical proportions. She nodded solemnly. "I am important, more than scientist." Her vocabulary seemed to be expanding by the hour as she struggled to find words. "My absence creates danger. For me, for you, for Earth." Outside, the helicopter sounds grew more distant, but Lyra remained tense. She began gathering materials from around the cabin. Pieces of his old radio, copper wire, even crystals from a decorative geode he'd found years ago, assembling them with purpose. "What are you doing?" Michael asked, watching her fingers move with precise, practiced motions. "Making. Communicator," she replied without looking up. "Must contact ship. Explain. Mistake." As she worked, Michael noticed how her wounds had almost completely healed overnight. Whatever she was, whoever she was, Lyra was far more remarkable than he had initially realized. and as the radio continued to broadcast increasingly alarming news about the alien vessel demanding the return of someone called Her Luminance, a chilling suspicion began forming in Michael's mind about just how important his unexpected guest might truly be. Michael awoke to Lyra's hand pressed urgently against his shoulder, her violet eyes wide with alarm. Her wings vibrated with tension, creating an almost imperceptible hum. "They come," she whispered, her English now remarkably fluid after just 3 days. "Many humans, with weapons." Before Michael could respond, his trained ear caught it too, the whisper of movement through underbrush, too methodical to be wildlife. He peered through a gap in the curtains and glimpsed camouflaged figures advancing through the trees, their movements revealing military precision. "How did they find us?" he muttered, quickly gathering essentials into his pack. "My energy signature," Lyra explained, dismantling the half-finished communication device she'd been working on. "All misery emit quantum patterns, especially royalty." The word hung between them as Michael paused. Royalty. Lyra met his gaze directly. "There is no time now for full explanations. But if your military captures me, it will be interpreted as an act of war by my people." An amplified voice shattered the morning stillness. "This is the United States Special Forces. We have the cabin surrounded. Come out with your hands visible." Michael's mind raced through options, drawing on 2 decades of wilderness experience. There's a network of caves 3 miles south that doesn't appear on any maps. If we reach them, we might be able to hide long enough for you to finish your communicator. Slinging the pack over his shoulder, he led Lyra to a concealed trapdoor. "My own addition," he explained, revealing a narrow tunnel. "It connects to an old mining shaft. Designed it as an emergency exit after that wildfire 5 years back. They emerged 50 yards away, concealed by dense undergrowth, just as soldiers breached the cabin door. Michael guided Lyra through hidden game trails, moving swiftly but deliberately to avoid leaving obvious tracks. His intimate knowledge of the forest provided a temporary advantage, but the distant sound of helicopters suggested their lead was precarious. "They're using thermal imaging," Michael realized, noting the search patterns. "We need to mask our heat signatures." Lyra pointed toward the sound of rushing water ahead. "The river will help." They reached the swollen creek, unusually high from recent rains. As they waded in, gunfire erupted from the ridgeline above, warning shots, but close enough to send splinters flying from a nearby log. "They spotted us," Michael shouted over the roaring water. "We need to." His words cut off as searing pain tore through his shoulder. The impact sent him stumbling, losing his footing in the swift current. As he fell, he caught a glimpse of Lyra diving toward him, her expression transforming from fear to something ancient and powerful. The cold water closed over them both, but instead of the chaotic tumble he expected, Michael felt himself enveloped in something like a bubble of perfectly still air. Lyra's arms encircled him, her wings extended to their full impressive span, now glowing with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with what seemed like internal energy. They plunged over a 10-foot waterfall, yet remained encased in this impossible sphere of protection. Landing in the churning pool below, they drifted behind the cascading water into a hidden grotto Michael had never discovered despite his years exploring these woods. Safe for the moment, Lyra turned her attention to his wound. Without speaking, she placed her palms over the bullet hole, her eyes closing in concentration. A warm sensation spread through Michael's shoulder as her luminescent blood seeped from her palms into his wound. "What are you?" He began, then gasped as images flooded his consciousness. Vast crystal cities, ceremonial halls, a crown being placed upon Lyra's brow before thousands of her kind. And in that moment of connection, as military boots trampled the forest above, Michael finally understood exactly who he had found in the forest, and the true scale of what was at stake. Michael gasped as his consciousness expanded beyond the confines of the hidden grotto, beyond his body, beyond Earth itself. The mental connection with Lyra overwhelmed his senses with impossible knowledge and memories that were not his own. He saw a sprawling civilization spanning multiple star systems, the Naziri Collective, 7 distinct species united under a single governance structure. At its center stood Lyra, not as the vulnerable girl he had rescued, but as a majestic sovereign. Her wings expanded to their full glory as she addressed a grand assembly of beings both familiar and utterly alien in form. "You're seeing my memories," Lyra's voice echoed in his mind. The neural transfer is a side effect of the healing process. Michael watched as centuries compressed into moments. Lyra's coronation 300 years ago, though she appeared no older than she did now. Diplomatic missions to integrate new worlds into the collective. Her championing of progressive reforms that challenged the rigid hierarchy of Naziri society. Then came darker images, heated debates in ornate chambers as traditionalist ministers opposed her initiatives, whispered conspiracies, and finally sabotage during what was meant to be a routine scientific expedition to study Earth from a distance. They never intended for me to make contact. Lyra communicated through their link. My ship was damaged deliberately. My guards sacrificed themselves to ensure my escape pod launched. The mental barrage slowed as Michael's consciousness began to reassert itself, the cave coming back into focus. His shoulder no longer burned with pain, though a slight iridescent shimmer remained where the bullet had entered. "Your people," he managed, his voice hoarse. "They think we've captured you." Lyra nodded, her expression grave. "The Naziri Council is divided. Some wish only to retrieve me, but others, those who orchestrated this, seek justification for more drastic measures." "Invasion," Michael said, the word hanging heavy between them. "Worse," she replied. "Some factions believe primitive species pose existential threats to the collective's stability. They would rather eliminate potential problems than risk cultural contamination." Through their new connection, Michael felt the weight of her anguish, not just for her own predicament, but for the millions of lives caught in a political struggle they knew nothing about. "We need to contact your fleet," he said, pushing himself upright. "Tell them you're safe, that we're helping you." "It's not that simple," Lyra replied, collecting fragments of her dismantled communication device. "Even as Queen, I answer to the Council. Without proof that Earth poses no threat, the hardliners will override my authority." Michael felt an unexpected surge of anger through their connection. Lyra's frustration at the limitations of her own political system. With it came something new, her admiration for the simple directness with which she had acted, rescuing her without committee approvals or diplomatic protocols. "What proof would convince them?" he asked. Lyra's gaze became distant. "They need to understand humanity's potential. Our civilization achieved stability through perfect order, but at a cost. We've forgotten how to adapt, how to face the unexpected." Her eyes refocused on Michael. "What I've seen in you, resourcefulness, compassion toward an unknown being, courage in the face of uncertainty. These qualities are precisely what the collective has engineered out of our society." A plan began forming in Michael's mind, one that Lyra could perceive through their strengthening bond. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it might be Earth's only chance. Outside their sanctuary, the sounds of the search continued, boots on stone, dogs barking, helicopter rotors. They were running out of time. "There's someone who might help us," Michael said finally. "But reaching him means crossing 20 miles of mountain wilderness with every branch of the military looking for us." Lyra's wings shimmered with renewed determination. "Then we should begin immediately. Through our connection, I'll show you what awaits Earth if we fail." The images she shared made Michael's decision absolute. Whatever stood between them and salvation, human or alien, would not be enough to stop them. Lightning split the sky as Michael and Lyra crested the ridge, rain lashing against them in sheets. The storm had arrived with perfect timing, temporarily grounding the helicopters and interfering with thermal imaging. Through their mental link, Michael sensed Lyra's discomfort. The Nezeri evolved in a world with gentler weather patterns, but also her determination. "We're close," Michael shouted over the thunder, pointing toward a barely visible trail winding up the mountainside. "Less than a mile now." The path ended at a chain-link fence, topped with barbed wire, surrounding what appeared to be an ordinary mountain cabin. Solar panels and wind turbines dotted the property, alongside satellite dishes and antennas of various designs. A hand-painted sign read simply, "Trespassers will be composted." "Your father lives here?" Lyra asked through their connection, picking up Michael's conflicted emotions. "Estranged father," Michael corrected aloud. "Carter Harrington, former aerospace engineer, current paranoid recluse." They approached the gate cautiously. Before Michael could reach for the intercom, floodlights blazed to life, illuminating them in harsh white light despite the storm. "That's far enough," came a gruff voice through a concealed speaker. "State your business or start running." "It's Michael," he called out. "Your son." A long silence followed, broken only by the rumble of thunder. Finally, the voice returned, quieter now. "You brought company." "She needs help," Michael replied. "And so do I, please, Dad." Another pause, then the gate unlocked with a metallic clank. As they approached the cabin, the door swung open to reveal a lean man in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, holding a shotgun casually at his side. 15 years without a word," Carter said, his gaze moving from Michael to Lyra. "Then you show up with a blue woman with wings during what the radio's calling a potential alien invasion." His weathered face cracked into an unexpected smile. "Always had your mother's sense of timing." Inside, the cabin's rustic exterior gave way to a technological wonderland. Computers, engineering equipment, and half-assembled devices covered nearly every surface. Carter handed them towels without comment on Lyra's obviously alien appearance. "Government's going crazy trying to find you too," he said, gesturing toward a bank of monitors displaying military communications. "I've been intercepting their transmissions since those ships appeared." Michael explained their situation while Lyra examined Carter's equipment with evident interest. Through their connection, Michael sensed her surprise at finding such advanced technology in this isolated location. "This power configuration," she said, pointing to one of Carter's experimental devices. "It resembles elementary Nezeri energy systems." Carter's eyebrows rose. "You understand this?" "Your son rescued me without question," Lyra replied. "Perhaps helping unusual strangers runs in your family." Something in her words seemed to resonate with the old man. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded sharply. "What do you need?" Lyra spread the components of her damaged communicator on a workbench. "A way to contact my ship with enough bandwidth to transmit proof that I'm here willingly and that humanity deserves protection." Carter's eyes lit with the challenge. "The military's jamming conventional signals, but I've been working on something they won't expect." He unveiled a device partially covered by a tarp. Quantum entanglement communicator. Theoretical, according to official science, been my pet project for years. This might work, Lyra breathed, her wings fluttering with excitement. With modifications to match Neziri frequencies. As they worked through the night, the storm intensified. Michael moved between helping them and monitoring the perimeter, aware that their head start was rapidly dwindling. Through occasional glimpses of news broadcasts, he watched the world's mounting panic as ultimatums from the Neziri fleet grew increasingly dire. Near dawn, exhausted but triumphant, Lyra made the final adjustment to their improvised communicator. "It's ready," she announced. At that exact moment, Carter's security system blared a warning. On the monitors, dozens of heat signatures appeared, converging on the compound from all directions. They had run out of time. "How much time do you need?" Michael asked, checking the ammunition in the hunting rifle Carter had pressed into his hands. 10 minutes minimum, Lyra replied, her fingers moving with incredible precision across the communicator's interface. But a clear signal will require at least 15. Carter studied the security monitors grimly. Standard tactical formation. They're professionals. He pulled a lever beneath his workbench, revealing a hidden gun cabinet. Good thing I'm not exactly standard. A metallic voice cut through the tension. "Attention occupants. This is Colonel Eleanor Reed, Joint Special Operations Command. We have authorization to use lethal force if necessary. You have 30 seconds to surrender." Michael and Carter exchanged glances, decades of estrangement momentarily forgotten in their mutual understanding of what needed to be done. Through his bond with Lyra, Michael felt her distress at putting them in danger, and her determination to prevent interstellar war. "I'm going out there," Michael said. "Maybe I can buy you time." Carter gripped his son's shoulder. Together. When Michael began to protest, the older man cut him off. 15 years ago, I chose my work over my family. Not making that mistake again." Before they could reach the door, an unexpected voice called from outside. "Michael Harrington, Lyra of the Neziri. I'm approaching alone under a flag of truce. I believe we share a common goal." On the monitor, a single figure walked toward the cabin, hands raised. Colonel Reed was a compact woman in her 50s, her bearing unmistakably military, despite the lack of visible weapons. Michael cracked the door, rifle ready. What common goal would that be? "Preventing Earth from becoming collateral damage in someone else's war," she replied evenly. "May I come in? Time is something we all lack right now." Inside, Reed took in Lyra's alien appearance without flinching. "Impressive," she said simply. "My superiors believe capturing you is our best option. I disagree. How did you find us?" Carter demanded suspiciously. "Your quantum experiments have been on our radar for years, Mr. Harrington." She turned to Lyra. "And Your Majesty, yes, we've decoded enough of your people's communications to understand who you are. Your unique energy signature became traceable once we knew what to look for." Through their mental link, Michael sensed Lyra's cautious assessment. "You're proposing cooperation instead of capture," she stated. Reed nodded. "I've been monitoring both sides of this conflict. Your hardliners want a reason to attack. Our hardliners want to control alien technology. Neither gets what they want if we can establish peaceful contact." A distant explosion rocked the compound, causing the lights to flicker. "Unfortunately," Reed continued, "not everyone shares my assessment. We have maybe 5 minutes before my second-in-command loses patience and launches a full assault." Carter checked his monitors. "Perimeter defenses are holding, but not for long." "What's your plan?" Michael asked Reed. "Get Her Majesty to Thunder Mountain," she replied. "It's the highest point in the region with minimal electromagnetic interference. From there, she might establish direct contact with our fleet." "Might," Carter challenged. "It's a 20% chance at best," Reed admitted. "But it's better odds than we have right now." Another explosion, closer this time. Through the windows, Michael could see figures advancing through the tree line. "I can improve those odds," Carter said suddenly, moving toward his workbench. "The quantum communicator can be modified to amplify her signal, act as a relay. But it would require someone to remain here to maintain the connection." Lyra grasped the implication immediately. That would be a one-way transmission. Carter met his son's eyes. "Some bridges can't be unburned, but maybe they can be rebuilt for the next generation." He pressed a data drive into Michael's hand. "Everything I should have shared with you years ago. Get her to the mountain. I'll make sure they hear her." As the first bullets struck the cabin walls, the four unlikely allies formulated their desperate plan. A human military officer, an alien queen, a park ranger, and a reclusive genius, united by the simplest of human instincts: survival. The military transport helicopter cut through the lingering storm clouds, Carol Reed at the controls, while Michael and Lyra sat tensely in the rear compartment. The diversion had worked. Carter's spectacular defense of the compound had drawn most of the assault team away from their escape route, giving them just enough time to reach Reed's concealed aircraft. "We're being tracked," Reed announced, banking sharply as warning indicators flashed across her console. "Hostile helicopters, 3 o'clock. Through the rain-streaked window, Michael spotted 2 attack helicopters approaching rapidly. "Those aren't from your unit." "Different command structure," Reed replied grimly. "Pentagon divided jurisdiction. Standard procedure when they want plausible deniability." A missile streaked past them, close enough that Michael felt the heat of its exhaust. "They're not trying to capture us anymore," he realized. "They want to eliminate us." Lyra placed her hand on the helicopter's metal skin, eyes closed in concentration. Through their mental connection, Michael felt her drawing on some internal energy source, extending her consciousness outward. The pursuing helicopters suddenly veered off course, their pilots visibly struggling with controls that no longer responded to them. "How did you," Reed began, but cut herself off as new alerts blared from her console. "We've got bigger problems. Look up." Above them, the clouds were parting, not due to natural weather patterns, but as if pushed aside by an enormous invisible force. A massive Nizuri vessel emerged through the gap, easily the size of an aircraft carrier, but with the sleek, organic lines characteristic of Lyra's technology. The royal emissary, Lyra breathed. Verex's flagship. Michael picked up her fear through their connection. "Who's Verex?" "My Grand Minister, the most conservative voice on the council." Her wings trembled slightly, and apparently now in command of the rescue operation. Reed guided their helicopter toward Thunder Mountain's peak, now visible through breaks in the clouds. "We're 7 minutes out. Who am I going to be negotiating with up there?" "No one," Lyra replied, her expression hardening into something Michael had glimpsed only in her memories, the face of a sovereign, not a fugitive. "I will speak for my people. Colonel Reed will speak for Earth." "And me?" Michael asked. Lyra's eyes met his. "You are something neither of our civilizations has encountered before, a bridge between species. Through our connection, you understand the Naziri better than any human alive." The helicopter settled onto the rocky summit just as the first Naziri shuttle descended from the larger vessel, its hull shimmering with the same iridescent quality as Lyra's skin. Around the mountain's base, Michael could see military vehicles establishing a perimeter, though whether to protect them or contain them remained unclear. As the shuttle's hatch opened, Lyra straightened her posture, her wings extending to their full impressive span. In that moment, even in her tattered earth clothes, she was every inch a queen. 4 Naziri emerged, taller than Lyra, with more angular features and wings that seemed designed more for protection than flight. Their formal attire marked them as high officials, and each carried what appeared to be ceremonial staffs that Michael sensed, through his connection with Lyra, were actually sophisticated weapons. "Your Luminance," the foremost Naziri said in flawless English, bowing deeply. "The collective has been in chaos since your disappearance." Grand Minister Verix, Lyra acknowledged coolly. "I see you've taken command of my rescue operation personally." "The Council required leadership during this crisis," Verix replied. His gaze shifted to Michael and Reed. "You appear unharmed. These humans held you against your will." "Quite the opposite," Lyra stated firmly. "They saved my life, protected me from those who would exploit my presence, and risked everything to help me contact you." Verix's expression remained impassive, but Michael, through his link with Lyra, sensed the minister's displeasure, and something darker beneath it. "Nevertheless," Verix said, "the diplomatic security protocol is clear. When a royal is endangered, isolation and evaluation are mandatory." He gestured to his guards. "We have a medical chamber prepared aboard the shuttle." As the guards moved forward, Michael felt Lyra's alarm spike through their connection, and with it, a sudden certainty that if she boarded that shuttle alone, she would never return. Michael stepped forward, positioning himself between Lyra and the Naziri guards. "She's not going anywhere alone." Verix's expression shifted to something like amused contempt. "This human presumes to dictate terms to the Naziri collective." "Not dictating," Michael replied calmly, observing. "Your shuttle's medical chamber is designed for isolation, not treatment. And those ceremonial staffs are calibrated for neural disruption, not protection." A ripple of surprise passed through the Naziri delegation. Through their mental link, Lyra projected a single word to Michael: careful. Colonel Reed moved subtly to flank Michael. "Perhaps we should all take a step back. Earth is open to peaceful diplomatic relations with the Naziri collective, but any attempt to remove Her Majesty against her will would be interpreted as a hostile act." Verix's wings shifted in a pattern that Michael recognized, through Lyra's memories, as indicating barely controlled anger. "You have no concept of what's at stake. The collective has maintained perfect stability for 10,000 years by isolating ourselves from unpredictable species. Yet here you are," Michael countered, faced with something unexpected. "And your only solution is elimination rather than adaptation." "Enough," Lyra commanded, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of authority. "Grand Minister, I recognize the attempted assassination that damaged my ship as your work. The same faction that has advocated for Earth's destruction rather than contact." For a moment, silence hung in the thin mountain air. Then Verix smiled, a cold, calculating expression. "Your time among these humans has affected your judgment, your luminance. The Council will understand when I explain your confusion." He raised his staff, and the other guards followed suit. Behind them, additional Naziri emerged from the shuttle, weapons ready. In that critical moment, a blinding light erupted from the valley below, followed by a pulse that rippled visibly through the air. The Naziri guards staggered, their staffs temporarily disabled. "Dad," Michael whispered, recognizing the signature of Carter's quantum technology. At the same instant, Lyra grasped Michael's hand. Their connection, already strong, suddenly expanded exponentially as Carter's signal amplified the quantum entanglement between them. Through Michael, Lyra accessed something uniquely human, the capacity to improvise, to find solutions where none seemed possible. Their merged consciousness projected outward, touching the minds of everyone present. The Nezari delegation, Coral Reed, and the human forces below. For a breathtaking moment, understanding flowed between species. The humans experienced the ordered beauty of Nezari civilization, its art and philosophy refined over millennia. The Nezari glimpsed humanity's chaotic creativity, its resilience forged through constant adaptation to challenges. And everyone present witnessed the truth of Verex's conspiracy, his fear that contact with humans would destabilize the carefully ordered Nezari society. As the connection faded, Verex fell to his knees, his wings drooping in the Nezari gesture of surrender. "They feel so much," he gasped. "How do they bear it?" "That's precisely what makes them valuable to us," Lyra replied, helping him rise. "Our perfection has become stagnation. Their chaos is evolution." In the days that followed, a new understanding emerged between Earth and the Nezari collective. Under Lyra's guidance, a treaty was established, not one of military alliance or technological exchange, but of cultural connection. Earth would remain independent, developing at its own pace, while selected representatives like Michael would visit the Nezari worlds to share humanity's adaptive perspective. Carter Harrington, against all expectations, survived his stand at the compound. His quantum technology became the foundation for a new communication system between worlds, earning him the recognition his genius had always deserved. Coral Reed was appointed Earth's first official ambassador to the collective, her pragmatic approach respected by both species. And Michael found himself in an unprecedented position, neither fully human nor Nezari, but a bridge between civilizations. Through his permanent connection with Lyra, he helped translate not just language but cultural concepts between species. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Michael and Lyra stood again in the Appalachian forest where he had found her. The crater had grown over with wildflowers, adaptable life reclaiming disturbed ground. "Did you know?" Michael asked. "When I found you, did you know what would happen?" Lyra's wings shimmered in the dappled sunlight. "How could I? Unpredictability is your species' gift, not mine." She took his hand, their connection humming between them. "But I'm learning." As they walked together beneath ancient trees, representatives of civilizations separated by light years, yet connected through understanding, both recognized the simple truth that had saved two worlds. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in perfect order, but in the beautiful uncertainty of the unexpected.